at my time I had to fight with my dad and buy a Photon. उस पे 2 Mbps speed used to come on campus, right? Because the campus net had blocked YouTube. Bunch of the, it was very weird. Like if you search for analytics, it would be banned because it had anal in analytics, right? So half the stuff on the internet was not accessible. So I went and got a Photon, and whatever I learned was because of that goddamn Photon. Like on the 2 Mbps connection, I discovered Twitter and YouTube and learned about all Steve Jobs. All that happened because of that Photon, right? So now every kid has an internet connection, so they have no excuse left. If you decide that I want to be a VC, you can't not know a VC story. Or if you want to be a programmer, you say you want to learn JavaScript or whatever, React Native, you have everything at your disposal, right? You don't have any excuse to say that I don't know this because you didn't learn it. Like, that's the only answer.
After a very long break, welcome back to season 2 of Don't Follow the Leader. If this is your first episode, my name is Noah Martins, and this is a platform where I interact with the people I like to call society's exceptions. These are entrepreneurs, business leaders, comedians, and entertainers. Basically, people who are high performers and risk takers and are living lives very different from the norm. I try to understand how they think and what motivates them and what their creative and decision-making processes look like. So if that's something you think you'd be interested in, please click that subscribe button so that more people can see my videos and you get regular updates from the stuff I post. just please click the subscribe button. No, it'll help the channel a lot, and it would help me get these videos to more people. You could also follow me on social media for regular updates and some other fun content, stand-up comedy videos, reels, my thoughts on things. Today's really special guest is Kushal Bhagia. He is a former entrepreneur turned venture capitalist and is the CEO of FirstCheck, which is an early stage venture capital firm from India that operates on a very interesting thesis. Kushal has also come to be a mentor and friend of mine, as I've been working with him at FirstCheck for the last 9 months. So getting to have this conversation with him was actually pretty special to me. In this episode, we talk about his journey from entrepreneurship straight out of college to running his own venture capital firm at 31. We talk about what he looks for in the startups and the people that he backs. We also talk about what he thinks the Indian startup ecosystem will look like in the next 10 to 15 years. This was a really interesting and fun conversation to have, and I hope you stick around till the end and enjoy it. Cheers. Thanks for doing this, first of all.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay. So what is FirstCheck?
FirstCheck is a pre-seed stage fund. We invest and back Indian founders that are building, that want to build large-scale tech companies. The way we invest is we have a network of founder angels. These are all folks who have built and scaled a company, sold a company. They know how to build products and scale tech companies. And we, as a fund, we simply empower them to invest. Okay. So we have about 20 such partners, like Apramya, the Taxi for Sure and Vocal founder, Vidit from Meesho, Deepak Devakar from Mindtickle, PJ, the founder of Paytm Money. So these folks have all built, run companies in various domains, and FirstCheck is a fund that basically gives them more money to do angel investments, and thereby sort of empowers founder angels to sort of lead rounds and invest more money in upcoming founders.
The philosophy being that since they have grown companies, they know how startups work.
Yeah, so if you look at most unicorns in India, China, US, anywhere in the world, typically these large-scale successful outcomes in venture, these companies have a founder angel who has backed them in their early rounds.
Right.
Almost all of them. Like India also, if you take examples, the Flipkart.com raised from the Jungly.com founder, Ola raised from the Snapdeal founders, Topper raised from Zishan. Housing.com raised from Zishan. So there are a bunch of these examples which again and again in history you will see that these founder angels somehow get into the best deals again and again. And there's a very good reason for it, that one is these people have great access, right? So like if you look at somebody like say a Vidit from Meesho, right? He's from IIT Delhi. He's like a poster boy for anybody who's from IIT Delhi who's looking to start a company, right? And that's like a big catchment area, right? Typically, if somebody does start a company, they would want to go and pitch to him and try and get him on board as an angel. Or if say somebody starting something in social commerce, e-commerce, WhatsApp-based stuff, anything around that, if they have a way to connect to him, they will for sure go and pitch to him and try and get him on board. because it's a brand, right? And secondly, founders recognize that these guys can give me help which pure capitalists can't.
Right.
Like a venture capitalist cannot have the domain expertise across sectors. Of course, they have smart people and they can help you in a lot of ways. But usually, a founder who has built a product, scaled an organization, been through what you have to go through for the next 5-10 years, that person's experience is invaluable. So any upcoming founder wants to go to them and pitch, and they want to go and raise from them.
Right.
So they have great deal flow, they have great brand. And then lastly, because they have built and run a company, right, they are often able to anticipate what's next. Where do the gaps lie? What more do users want? What else should exist? They know how venture capitalists think because they have themselves raised from them multiple times. They know how large markets work, how technology works, and they're also in touch with their own users, right? So they are often able to anticipate what could come next, and hence invest in those companies that will come next. So these three things is what we believe. These are three edges which they have: brand, access, and judgment. And these three things are, I think, why they consistently sort of back the best performing companies in India and abroad. So we as a fund, we simply empower them with more capital. So if they invest some money of their own, they can draw upon more money from the fund, and we'll back them wherever they invest.
Right. Since a lot of the people watching might be from school and college, can you explain what venture capital is?
Sure. So venture capital is basically a form of funding a business where an investor will take a certain percentage of your company. So if say they give you 2 crore rupees, they might take 10-20% say ownership in your company, and they'll just own those shares in your company. They'll have some rights and all along with that, but you run the company.
Okay.
They are not involved in what you do day to day, who you want to sell to, what you want to do. That's your business, right? They will take a bet on you and your idea and your abilities, and say, okay, if I give Noah 2 crores today, maybe he'll do really well and grow this into the next Flipkart or the next Swiggy or Ola or whatever, and this company could be worth billions in the future. And when it does become that big, at that point I will sell my shares to somebody else, right? So this is different from traditional financing of businesses, which was debt financing, right? Where if you go to a bank, for example, they will give you 2 crore rupees, but they will either ask for a collateral, where so you either put your house on mortgage or something else on mortgage, or somebody else has to sign security with you. So it could be your dad or your relatives or somebody else, and you have an obligation to pay that money back, right? Which is how debt works. Here there's no obligation to pay the money back.
Right.
You're obligated to get them and exit at a larger point, but if it fails, it fails. They're taking that risk on. So that's on them. If you try your best and the company doesn't work, that's fine. That VC completely expects that to happen.
Okay.
Right. So that's what venture capital is, where somebody gives you money for a percentage in your company, and that somebody is basically betting on your future success. So you're not giving any collateral, you're not giving any interest payments, you don't have to pay the money back in any time frame. But the expectation from you is that in about 5 to 8 years time frame, you will make this into a very large company, and that's how this investor will make money.
But as a venture capitalist, are you investing your own money?
No. So in the VC world, there are professional venture capitalists who raise a fund, like for example, First Check as a fund, or a Sequoia as a fund, or a Axel as a fund, or a India Quotient, Matrix. All these guys have funds. But then there are angels. So angels are like the people that we work with. For example, an Apramaya or say Kunal Shah from Freecharge, right? So from Cred now. So these are people who invest their own money. The VCs are people who raise money from other people. They create a fund, and then the fund invests in companies. So you can think of it something like a mutual fund, right? Like if you invest in a mutual fund, there's a fund manager who manages that money on your behalf, and then that fund manager decides which stocks to invest in. Similarly, in a VC fund, there's a fund manager who raises this money from HNIs, typically rich people basically, or institutional money, or like for example, a lot of pension funds invest in VC funds, university endowments invest in VC funds. So these fund managers raise that capital, and it is now their job to deploy that capital into startups, and hopefully return this money to the investors over a 8-10 year time frame.
Right. So you're 31 years old.
Yes.
I mean, from my understanding, that's pretty young to be running your own VC firm, especially in India.
Yeah.
So how did you get here? What's your story?
So I know this sounds cliche, but it was quite random and not planned out at all.
Okay.
So I graduated from BITS, the Goa campus, in 2012. In 2011 or 10, I think I read the Steve Jobs book, and that just blew my mind, and Actually, before the book came out, I read a different book on Steve Jobs, which covered him up till the iPod, not even the iPhone.
Okay.
And just that story blew my mind. And then then I read the new one, and I read up on him online, and then I sort of went down that rabbit hole of figuring out what tech entrepreneurship is and why these companies are so valuable. What do they do? Creating a dent in the universe. That line by Steve Jobs, that's always stayed with me. And being the idealistic, 20, 21-year-old I was, I decided I will also start a company. I don't want to do a job and all. I decided that I did sit for placements, but like I knew that I'll not really go and join these companies. So me and my co-founder Karthik, we were both in the same hostel in BITS, and we had dabbled in a couple of entrepreneurial ventures by the second, third year. By the fourth year, we were both fans of jobs, and we thought, yeah, we should also make our dent in the universe. So let's start a company. We knew that we had to start a company. And Karthik had some experiments going on in his practice school, his internship, final sem internship, where he was playing with the Kinect, the motion sensor by Microsoft, and he did some experiments with kids, and he realized that motion-based games do work really well with young kids, and the results were quite fabulous. He did some, he put a video up online, and that got covered by Times of India, and it sort of got a lot of good appreciation. So we thought this could work, and then we decided like let's do this. Let's start making educational games for kindergarten children. The kindergarten part came later. We decided let's do something with the Kinect, and at that point we thought that motion-based interaction is the future. I still think it's the future, but we were probably too early back then. But we thought that everything you do with a computer will be gesture based and movement based, and we thought we were getting onto the right trend. So we started a company called Nai Disha Studios, which used to make educational games for kindergarten kids. So Karthik and I ran that. I was part of it for 4 years. Karthik ran it for another couple of years after me. Unfortunately, the company didn't work out, and after I left, then I joined Upgrad, which is Ronnie Screwwala's and Mayank's online education company based out of Bombay. They do professional online education for working professionals. I did that for 2 years. Then I was again thinking of starting something up, but nothing was really clicking as such. And I had friends at this fund in Bombay called India Quotient. So a friend of mine, like a friend come mentor of mine called Gagan Goyal, he's a partner there at IQ. So he used to run a group of angels in Bombay called Powai Lake Ventures. So they were these IIT Bombay alums like Zishan from Topper and bunch of others who used to invest in upcoming startups. And they had backed companies like Ola, Housing.com, Find, good companies they had backed. So Gagan really wanted to, and what ended up happening is that Angel Network from Powai, right, it sort of collapsed after 2015-16 because the startup bubble burst. After 15, there was like this down low where companies were not getting funded for like a year, right? Everybody was really thinking, is the startup story real and all that. But Gagan wanted to revive this. He knew me from a while back. He also used to run a company which used to sell to schools. So we knew each other since like my Nai Disha days and his Think Lab days. So he told me that like, what are you doing in life? And you've quit Upgrad but you've not started a company yet. And by that time I had gone through some 3-4 pilots. And none of it was giving me like conviction that I will do this now for 10 years. So Gagan came to me with this idea that we want to do this at India Quotient. Why don't you run it, and we'll figure out how to help you raise the money and all that. So they were kind enough to basically give me the idea and the platform on a platter. After I came on board, we decided it'll work better as a separate org and a separate brand. So I still work closely with them, but the way we structured it is that it's a separate fund with IQ basically putting up a bunch of the money in the fund. And then we got other people to invest as well. So it's not just IQ's fund. IQ is like one of the investors in the fund. And yeah, that's how it started. So honestly, I became a VC because Gagan pushed me to. So I'll be forever thankful to him for that. And yeah, I mean, I till the point I did it, I used to think that VC not really for me. But once I started doing it, I realized I really enjoy this. I like meeting people. I like learning new things. I like helping people out. And after that, there's just not been any looking back. Yeah.
But what qualifies someone to be a VC?
So my role as a VC is quite different from a VC like Gagan or somebody who works at Matrix or Sequoia or Accel. These people typically take 4-5 bets a year, and they run funds. So if they raise a new fund, they'll take 3-4-5 bets for maybe first 2-3 years of the fund, and then they have to wait till the company becomes big, and once it becomes big, they'll get an exit and they return the fund. So the qualities for that traditional VC role are slightly different from what I'm doing, where I do a deal a week.
Okay.
We do 30-35 companies. This year we did 43 companies in a year. So my role is quite different. But to be a general venture capitalist, I think the qualities you need are one, most importantly, you need to, at least in tech, you need to understand tech and product. You need to understand how this world works, how technology works, how software works. How these companies can, why can these companies grow 1000x in a few years times. You need to have some kind of strong opinions about the future.
Okay.
That this is where we are today, but I know for a fact that this is how the world will look like in 2025 or 20 or 30, right? So think of the guy who backed Facebook, for example. Peter Thiel invested in them, right? They had nothing when he invested. They were a college network with 2-3 campuses live, but he could see the vision, a world where a large percentage of humanity would be on a social network, right? So that kind of vision is what you need.
Right.
In terms of personality traits, you need to be generally curious about the about just anything and everything under the sun, because predicting the future or trying to take a bet based on what might happen in the future, you can't think with one model. You can't just think financially or technologically or politically or economic. Like, you have to think of a lot of different things. Like, for example, this year the China apps ban happened, right? And suddenly all the Indian apps, a lot of the Indian apps got a big boost, and nobody would have predicted this, right? Even the VCs who did back the Indian apps, they would never have predicted that China apps will get banned, right? So it's a very multidisciplinary type role, where you need to keep track of a bunch of things happening in the world and take a view on what the world will be like in the future. So curiosity, you should like meeting people, you should genuinely like helping people, you should have the ability to help also. There are people who end up being VCs, but so some of them have maybe never built a tech product, or never worked in a tech company, or have never been a part of this world, but they, for whatever reason, they became a VC. But you can normally see the difference in that kind of a VC and a VC who has been there, done that.
Right, when someone understands both sides of it.
Yeah, exactly. So the founders, because you are sort of you're like the sounding board for the founder who's building the company, right? They'll call you with all kinds of questions. Should I take this investor? Should I launch this product? Should I go for this channel of marketing, etc., right? So you need to have a lot of different experiences, to be able to actually add value to them. Or you need to at least have a network where even if you don't know the answer, you can bring in some friend, or know somebody else who can help the founder out. Curiosity. By curiosity, I mean you should like to learn things for the sake of learning. Like, there are people who will read a lot or learn a lot, but they are very target driven or goal driven. I will learn, say, everything possible about furniture, for example, right? Or I'll read everything possible about laptops or electronics or whatever. But that's not how good VCs will read anything and everything under the sun based on curiosity, just because they like reading or they like learning more about stuff. So number one, I would repeat as curiosity. Number two, this ability to think about the future, understanding tech, and lastly, it's also a sales job in a way, where VC is not. It's not like it's a two-way bind, right? Like, suppose I want to fund you, you should also want to take my money, right? Because if you are a really good founder, there's probably like another 5 people like me who want to fund you, right? So what makes you choose me over the other 5 people? That's a sales job. Like, you have to convince the founder that I'll be the guy who will be worth the equity that you're giving up. So these are the traits sort of what you need to become a venture capitalist.
Okay, so this is a little more abstract question, and based on all the people I've spoken to on this podcast and off recently, I've seen this sort of pattern where the people who have this plan that you speak of, like who know who's not learning is very targeted. They'll have this goal. I want to be this. I want to be a that, and they'll achieve that goal. But a lot of the ambitious people who I've seen who don't have a goal, they end up doing really cool things because they're just like exploring life and doing whatever is right in front of them until they find something that they really like. So do you think it makes sense for people to set these kind of rigid goals, or should they be open to all of the experiences that they have?
I think this depends on person to person. There are some professions and some domains where you can have a rigid goal, right?
Or
Like
you must have a rigid
you
goal
must
to
have
achieve
a,
it.
like you
Right.
say you want to become a doctor,
Right.
and you are 18 years old, right?
Right.
You
can't
have to do
afford
MBBS, you
anything
have to
else
do your
in life.
masters,
Right.
you have to do a specialization,
Hmm.
and you have to slog it out for the next 5 to whatever 8, 9 years, whatever it takes to become a doctor, right? You want to be a heart surgeon, for example, right?
Yeah. You can't
There's no
afford
other
to
way to
decide
do
at
it.
30 that you want to.
Yeah, you can't just wing it. Like you have to
Hmm.
go through that training and put in the hours and become a reliable, a good heart surgeon. So some domains are very well defined. Like you want to become a CA, for example, you have to crack that exam, become a CA. Architect, you need a license, right? So
Right.
many of these things are licensed or somehow regulated, where you can't just go do stuff if you want to just take a shot at it. Uh, but there are other domains, especially I think I would say in entrepreneurship, finance, venture capital to an extent, where the world is much more random and there is no rigid set of qualifications which will enable you to do get into that domain. So there it can work for you, right? So I mean, if you sign up for that life, right, where you don't really know okay after 5-10 years what I'll be doing,
It's a high risk decision.
I wouldn't call it high risk. I would say it's high uncertainty.
Right.
Okay, risk is where you
Okay.
like, what so say someone like you're 18, you're 19 years old now, right?
20, yeah, whatever.
20, sorry.
Yeah.
And you're going to bid, so you're going to be an engineer soon. So at your base level, somebody will hire you for sure, right? You've done a BITS degree, you've graduated with that degree. कुछ नहीं हुआ तो somebody will pay you at least 5 lakhs a year and give you some job, right? You can speak English, you can communicate well. So for someone like you, the risk level is actually that, like that's your worst case outcome. Say you start a company or you try some wacky shit and it doesn't work. You'll some friend or somebody will refer you to some company and you will go get a job, right? So there are ways to mitigate. So you actually don't have a risk. That's what I thought when I started Nayi Disha, that look, I have already had this BITS degree. I come from a fairly upper middle class, well off family. If I don't get salary for a year or 1.5 year, the world is not going to end. I don't have to support somebody, right? I don't have. So I had that privilege, right? And if you go to a branded college in India, at least you earn that privilege, right? You went to an IIM, ISB, IIT, BITS, whatever. In India, you will know you will get a job. Or say you are a very good coder, right? Or you're a very good designer, or you have some innate talent in you, right? Where you know कि this तो I rock it, like coding मेरे को कभी भी दे मैं कुछ भी बना के देखो दे दूंगा, right? If you know that okay I'm good at this, right? So somebody will hire you, right? So that's your baseline outcome. That's the worst that can happen to you, that you get a job and you earn your money, right? You're not going to die hungry. So risk is mitigated that way. It's very risky if you're the first breadwinner in your family for like a generation, and and you're the first say college grad from your family and you decide to not take a job and go and start a company or do something, then that's risky, okay. But for most people who get into these institutes or who have some monetizable skill like coding, designing, selling, they have some innate skill. There's not really risk. There's uncertainty. They don't know what the outcome will be, but you know that okay, you're not going to die hungry.
Your bottom line is pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. So I would view it from that angle. Like look at your personal status. Maybe if you come from a decent off family, so then actually you have no risk in India. Like anybody who even I call by the upper middle class, but we are all actually first class, right? Like India is just a very poor country. So if you are in the so-called middle class or first class in India, you are already protected, actually speaking. So you can think about it like that, but if you just spend some more time thinking about it, you will realize that the worst case outcome is that some uncle, mama, chacha, dad, somebody will hire you or somebody will refer you in some company. और कुछ तो हो जाएगा मतलब it's not something where you will just be jobless at home for years together. So yeah, just think through it like that. If you are in that position, then you don't really have risk. If you are not, then you have risk. If you have the burden to earn basically for your family, right, then you are in a different category.
Right. So you started up straight out of college.
Yes.
Right. Your formal work experience that you have at Upgrad came later, and that
Yes.
too Upgrad is a startup.
Yes.
Right. Do you think it's a good idea for people to start up in college? Like I've asked Akhil from Real Learning this,
Yeah.
and he felt that yes, like college is the best time to start up because you have no liabilities,
Yeah.
right? And he's like, college should not be just an attempt; it should be your best attempt.
Yeah.
But then I've heard Harsha from Swiggy talk about it, and he said that without the real world experiences that he had,
Yeah.
he doesn't think that it would have been a good idea for him
Yeah.
to start up in college.
Yeah.
So, in your experience, both for you personally and based on the companies that you've invested in, or like your awareness of the startup scene in India, do you think it's a good idea for people to start up from college or to get some work experience and then start up?
I mean, see, again, for all things startups, right, there's no template answer. Every
Right.
startup has a different journey and
Sure.
a different, it's very path dependent actually, the way life works. So it's hard to say ki what worked for this person will also work for this person or will also work for you, right? Like, I had friends when I graduated who I knew were dumbasses. Like, I would pray to God if they started a company, right?
Right.
And I knew friends who are like super smart. Who it's not about that you're in college. It's about what have you been doing for those 5 years, right? Like we've funded companies now right out of college. There's kids coming out are super sharp, man. Like they've been coding for 5 years, right? So I mean, just because they're 22 years old doesn't mean they're inexperienced. They've already built 5, 10, 20 products before they even came to me, right? So for a person like that, I know this guy can build, right? There's no way that I'm taking a risk as a VC that if I fund them, they'll not be able to ship product, right? But if you come to me with, you've done nothing in the 4 years on campus, you got like okay CGPA and done some extracurriculars and like you're not sold anything ever, it's hard to believe that you'll be able to build a company, right? So I wouldn't look at if I'm a college student, I would ask myself this, that can I build stuff? Can I sell stuff? Do I have evidence or do I have any kind of track record of doing either of these? Are the two things you do as an entrepreneur, right?
Build
As
stuff
a
and
base
sell
of,
stuff.
yeah, these are the two things you need to do as a founder. At least in the first couple of years, that's all you do. You build and you sell. So if you have that, like I knew I could sell and Karthik could build. So we had that. We were clear about that. कि ये तो अपन कर लेंगे. So that confidence you should have on yourself, and you should be able to convince others also that yes, I can do this. So that's how I would look at it. Like, so it's not a boilerplate answer that yes, you should start up or no, you should not start up. It comes down to what life experiences you have had, and do you feel you have the skill set to do either one of these things or ideally both of these things.
Right. What do you think are good reasons to start up and bad reasons to start up, and what do you have to get right? Like we've spoken about this
Yeah.
before. I work with you, so I
Yeah.
know what your answer is going to be. But
Yeah.
for everybody who's not watching, what are some things that you need to know before you start up? Or like,
Okay, so
yeah.
this is one of my favorite. As I told you,
Yeah.
so the reason I started Nidisha was completely wrong.
Okay.
Right, what I just said, right, that we saw the Kinect and we were excited and we want to build something on it, so we went and built it, right? That is not why you should start a company, okay? Like, the only reason why you should start a company is that you see a problem in the world that you desperately know that this shouldn't exist the way it does. This needs to be fixed, okay? And I'm the guy to fix it, right? Like, if you can't help yourself but think that why does this problem exist? I know that it can be solved. I know there are thousands or millions of people who have the same problem that I do, or at least I've seen other people have that problem, and I'll solve that problem. And after that, you come to what the tech or the product would be that will address the problem.
Right.
Okay, so most founders, especially college founders, they all make this mistake where they first swear to themselves, I will start a company, which is what I did, right? And then they decide, okay, now what company should I start? So what they default to is what they know. Okay, like, so Charlie Munger has this saying that to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Right? So why did we start a Kinect company? Because we knew how to program on the Kinect, right? So we said, okay, let's make Kinect game. We never asked, does the world need a Kinect-based education game startup? It did need it, but doesn't mean it would have, like, so, there's
Right.
you have to start from the problem first, then come to how you will address the problem, and not the other way around, that I'm going to do something in life and hence I'll
And
start a
solve
company.
the
Yeah.
problem. Right.
So again, there are companies that have been started like this, where there is a founder who decided that I will start a company. Okay, but then you will see that they have spent a lot of time cycling through various problems. You can do that approach where you say, I will be an entrepreneur, I will start a company. You can set up a team, 2 or 3 of you can do it, but don't commit to just start building something without first
You commit to the
clearly-
problem,
You commit to the problem.
not to the solution that you have. for it.
Precisely. So you first commit to, okay, I will first find this one big hairy problem that exists in the world and that I can uniquely solve, and then I will start to build the solution for that problem.
Right.
So that is the only reason to start a company,
Right.
because it looks very glamorous, right? That, oh wow, these people are raising millions in funding, they're coming on Economic Times, people come to take the interview and people podcast with them, etc. But the reality of it is, it's just very, very hard.
Right.
You are signing up for like 12 hours plus of work for maybe every day of your life, including every Sunday, every national holiday, your wife's birthday, your kid's birthday, everything. Like, you are going to be working for like that for the next 5 to 8 years. Even if you don't want to, like, you don't have a choice, because as a founder, right, everything in the company, at least in the first 2-3 years of the company, everything will fall on your desk. Because there are no people, there are no processes, everything is broken, right? You are just building, making it up as you go along.
It's a question of survival.
Yeah, so it's a very stressful journey, it's a very long journey, and you will not make it through if you genuinely care about that problem.
If you don't genuinely care.
Yeah, if you do something just because you want to start a company, you will not take that customer's call at Saturday night 11 p.m. or go meet some investor at Sunday morning 8. You will just feel, yeah, I can't do this anymore, right? So it's a unending, like, there's this unending pain. Like there's no you after a point you just get used to it. That's just how my life is right now, and that's how I'll maybe you'll carve out some personal time after the second, third year, but at least first 3-4 years are brutal. Like there's just no other life you have, right? So you better love what you're doing. Otherwise, there's just no point to it.
Right. Like I've recently spoke to some kid who messaged me. He just got into college and he wanted to start up, and so he messaged me because he was looking for a co-founder for some idea that he had. Okay, and it was solution driven. His idea was solution driven, not problem driven. But anyway, so he was so I explained to him how it works in that city. He had a lot of misconceptions about how the startup world works. He thought that founders make a lot of money while they are in their initial days of this thing. So that's clearly not true, right? Founders go through a lot of.
It's not true at all. Most founders make no money.
How much were you taking?
No money.
Exactly.
I had to borrow money from home to just survive.
When you all had funding?
After funding, I took some salary.
Okay.
But till I got funding, I used to like maybe make it work for like 15,000 a month. So the rent I would pay from the company's accounts. But for my own personal food, going out, whatever, like 10-15,000 you have to manage per month. Right? I think with inflation it probably be a little more now, but it was pretty bad. And you will see your batchmates, so they'll go buy MacBooks with their first salary, and they'll go buy a bike and a car, and you don't have that kind of money. When an investor gives you money, they're not giving you money, they're giving the money to the company. Right? So they're giving you money to hire people, build a product, do marketing, pay your lawyers, etc. Right? So you can't just pocket that money saying that, okay, I raised $1 million, so I'll take 1 crore out of that. That's not what's going to happen. You will get fired if you do that. What the investor, you can start taking some salary once the investors invest, because they want you to be comfortable. They don't want you to be struggling in your day-to-day life. But it's definitely not going to be a market salary. In all likelihood, it's going to be maybe 30-50% of what your CTC would have been if you went and joined an Amazon or a Flipkart or something like that. Maybe lesser than that. So you will actually only make money, and you will really make big money if you do it for 5 years plus and the company does really well.
Right. If you're one in 100, 1,000 startup that actually does.
This is the startup world. There are other types of businesses where, say, you start a recruiting agency, or you start a digital marketing agency, or you start selling something online on Shopify. Those are businesses where you can make easily up to 1 crore or more a year, and there's lesser risk there. Because you know what you're building. Like, for example, say I take a recruitment agency, for example, right? I'll go get a client. If I close this one position, I'll get 1 month salary as my payment, right? So if I close 5 of these in a month, I can make at least 5 lakhs to 10 lakhs a month easily, right? And my costs are just me and maybe 2-3 other people that I hire, so I can make do with that. So there your risk is, I'll just hire this 1 or 2 guys and pay their salary for a couple of months, 3 months till I get my first client. So there are businesses which are not that high risk. Right. So
those are businesses, but startup by definition are businesses that can scale fast.
Yes.
That probably are ahead of their time or something like that. So they have a very high.
Rate of failure. It's better now because its funding and all is fairly much easier now to raise than at my time in 2012. There are people like me investing in companies coming out of colleges. At that time, I think in my batch there was just me and the Varun Deshpande, who's now started Juno. But otherwise, +1 and +-1 batch, there was nobody who started. I think -1 or 2 batches, there was nobody who started companies right after college. So it was a pretty rare thing to see, and there was no ecosystem to support you. Now there are investors who will fund you, so you will at least get some salary. But if you are doing it for that salary, then you are in it for the wrong reasons. You can't be doing this thinking I'll get like a 1 crore salary. That's not what's going to happen.
The only right reason is that there's this problem that you want to solve and you think you're the right person to do it.
Yeah. Or you just love building stuff. Like there are also founders I meet, like for example the Postman guy at Astana. I spoke to him and he was just a hacker, man. Like he just loved building stuff. He built Postman one weekend, launched it, he got a bunch of, and it was this was probably 10th, 15th project of his, right? And maybe 3rd formal or 4th formal startup of his. So there are people like that also who just genuinely like hacking stuff up and launching it and see what happens. So that's also a good founder archetype. And then there are people who look at problems in the world and say, I want to solve that problem and I'll do this, and they go after that. But yeah, if you want to start a company to earn 1 crore a year and all, there are better ways to earn 1 crore a year.
So what are the things that you look for in the founders that you invest in? What are good signs? What are red flags? And what's the process for you for deciding which companies you fund?
So see, the number one criteria for any VC, right, is that is this a large market? Okay. By that I mean, if this company works and what this founder is saying, it comes true and they build it, can this company potentially do at least $100 million in revenue in 1 year? So if I'm funding you in 2020-21, by 28-29 I expect this company should be doing at least 100 million. 100 million means 750
in revenue.
750 800 crores. Okay. A software company revenue means that will be high gross margin revenue.
Right.
That is the number one criteria. It is not easy to estimate this, but you should be at least broadly right. Okay, like for example, if you look at Uber's first pitch deck, right, they had predicted the taxi, like the company couldn't be worth. No, they had predicted something which was very naive now in hindsight. They had predicted total market size as 2 billion or something like that.
Oh wow!
And they do 40 billion in GMV now or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So they were off by a wrong. They underestimated themselves as the founders, right? So it is hard to predict, but there are some cases where you know कि ये तो नहीं है market. Like there are some pitches you get where straight away you know कि यार this is not a big market. I know this is not a big market because there are just not enough people who care about this problem, right? So you can eliminate stuff by inversion a lot of times.
Okay.
But yeah, so that is criteria one. Is this a large market? Do enough people have this problem?
Right.
If it works, can this do 100 million in revenue?
That's from your side.
From my side, yeah.
Right.
So that's
Now,
what I look in the pitch.
in the
Does the
idea
founder
itself.
understand that he's
Right.
coming to me to
Okay.
pitch? Does he understand that is he the founder who's in it to build that large business, right?
Okay.
Founders also are all types. There are many people who all type of people running businesses come to us for funding, but very few of them understand what is VC funding. Right, like even they would learn from this podcast. They don't know that VCs expect a 100x or more return. It's a high risk game. They don't care if you fail, but if you win, you should really win big. That's how VCs think, right? So the founder also needs to be aligned with this. That's part of market basically. Second criteria would be the team's ability. Okay, so if say 2 40-year-old people who've been say MBAs from say IIMs and ISB and they've been running say FMCG companies, they've been say senior roles at PNG and HUL, these kind of people come and tell me I'm running a social network, I'm going to launch the next Snapchat. It's highly unlikely that they'll do it, right? Because to build a social network you need to be able to code either yourself or you need a strong team who can like move really fast, because social networks are not built by design, they are built by iteration. Like you build something, launch it, you
Can
learn.
you explain iteration for whoever doesn't understand?
Iteration is basically where you take a shot at the solution. You just quickly launch and build something and build something and launch it, see how it works. Then you take feedback from the user and the market, and then you again go back and build version 2. Then you do that next week, then you do that third week, fourth week, fifth week. So by the 10th, 12th week you have a completely different product from where you started.
Based on how the market reacted
Exactly.
to
Based on what users tell you.
Right.
So you will launch something and some you'll realize people just don't care about this feature, right? Sometimes you'll launch something and realize that they really love this feature. I did not think they would love it so much.
Right.
So that's what iteration means, right? So team ability say, I mean, is this team uniquely suited to build this company?
Okay.
Like this MBA team I spoke about, if they came and pitched to me some lending startup or some kind of startup which attacks FMCG distribution, then that space they would understand really well, and they would be uniquely suited to do those things.
Right.
So that I would bet on them for. So I would see whether this team that is pitching to me has the ability or the past experience or some kind of true insight into that space. This is something which you find out fairly fast when you're talking to a founder.
Right.
The best founders, I leave that meeting, I would have learned a lot in that meeting for sure. All the companies which we fund, right?
Yeah.
At the end of an hour talking to that founder, I will realize that this guy has gone down all the rabbit holes that I can possibly even think of in this domain, and he or she has sort of thought of all those scenarios and potential outcomes, and this is why they are building what they are building, right? So you look for that, how deeply has the founder thought through the idea. Right. If I ask the founder a question which they have not already thought of, then that's a big red flag.
Okay.
Right? Or if I say something to them when they say, oh, I never thought of that, or that's weird because I just spent 1 hour with you, right, where you've been doing this for months, so how have you not thought of this? So So that like how deeply are they thought through it? Do they have a unique earned insight of some sort where because they have been doing something, they have learned something about the world where other people don't know yet,
Right.
right? Like for if I have to give you an example of this, uh, Postman guy, right? He's been building apps forever, right? He knew that APIs will explode.
Right.
Back in when he started Postman, 2013, 14, whenever he started, APIs had just become a thing. Like every app or every company was not built on this API structure, right? So he saw it coming because he had been building apps for the past 10 years of his life,
Right.
right? So he knew that this is where software is going.
Right.
Everybody will have APIs and everybody will need APIs, and you need a tool for this. So he built it.
Right.
So he had that unique insight, right? So that's what you look for as an investor. Does this person
Have a unique.
insight? Does he know something about the world or this market which other people don't know?
Hmm.
And that's what is their right to win in that market. So market traction. So market and team are number one, the most important things.
Okay.
After that, I would look for some kind of proof of execution. Where so this depends now because I am a very early stage investor. If Asthana had come and pitched me Postman, I would have said yes right away because I know he can build, right? He's
Right.
built like multiple things before. So
Right.
I would not have a question of whether this guy can build or not. But if again it was some MBA guy and who doesn't know how to code, then I would say build something and show me, right? Because I don't know if you can actually build.
Right.
So that depends. So the execution piece depends on the team's ability. I have to balance that off with the ability of the team. If I feel that the team is strong but they don't have any prior experience in doing what they want to do, then I will have a higher bar for traction and proof of execution. But if I know this they will be able to build fairly easily because they have done it before, or I have other signals that tell me that they can build this, then I don't need to see traction. We can invest pre-product also. But usually it's a good sign if they've already built something because good founders they don't want to raise like you're not building product for me, right? You're building product because that's your company. So if you have been waiting around for funding to build a product, then that's usually a red flag.
Right.
The best founders just decide they want to do it and they go and do it.
Right.
And then they come and usually they don't even come for funding, they just chased by investors, right? So yeah, traction is the third thing that I would look at. So market size, team and execution game, these three things are the most important. Everything else is secondary after that.
Are there any common characteristics that good founders, people who are good founders have, or even co-founders, maybe like the relationship that co-founders have? Are there any things in a founder's personality that are either red flags or whatever, green flags, whatever the good sign is?
Honestly, so I've not been in venture long enough to answer that well, but
Okay.
my answer is that there's no template actually speaking, right? So people say that I want this type of founder, this is what is this. So and by the way, this is true, a lot of funds have this.
Right.
Like if you, I won't name them, but if you
Right,
see
right.
their founders, right?
Right.
There are some funds who like to back winner take all type founders, that this is the hyper competitive alpha male type guy who will just win at any cost and he will win. That's all they care about, right? There are some people who are not like that. There are some people who are like, the world is big and this market is huge. I don't care what ABC does. I care about building my company, right? So
Right.
they're not that hyper competitive.
Right.
There are all types of founders. Like, I don't think there is one answer saying that this is the one type of founder that will win this space. I would come back to the market. Like, depends on what you're doing. There are some spaces which will automatically have only one winner
Okay.
by the nature of that market.
Right.
Uber was one great example.
Hmm.
Like, it was known that every city will have one or two taxi apps.
Right.
So you had to win everywhere. So you had to go out and kill competition everywhere. So Travis was a great founder to set up Uber, and Bhavesh also was amazing to set up Ola. But if you are Girish from Freshworks, there are many other CRM companies or many other SaaS companies offering business software. There's never going to be one company that wins that market, right? But you need have ambition to make it big enough, but competitiveness or making sure that I will win at all costs, that is not what you need in that kind of a SaaS founder, right? So that's what I would. So there's no one answer. Again, I would think through what is this market and what type of founder do I need to win this market. There are all types. There are people who have like crazy stories of grit. People who have first gen college grads, parents who are farmers. There are people like who grew up pampered. Like Zuckerberg was like from a pretty rich family. Bill Gates was from a very rich family, right? So they didn't have any struggles in their life. They got whatever they needed from when they were born. And then there are other people who had to struggle through life and get to where they are. So So there's no one answer that okay, this type of person is what can build a large company.
Right.
That's why I said the problem is what is important. If the person has a good insight on the market and there's a real problem that needs to be solved, then they will solve it. In fact, this Mark Andreessen, right? He has this very famous blog on product market fit,
Okay.
and he basically says that if you have a very strong market, right, which means that there's a burning problem in the world, okay, and too many people have that problem, that market pulls the product out of the founder, okay, because even though the product is defective or it barely works, people will still use it because that problem is so bad that the alternative is facing that problem which they don't want to do, right? So in those kind of markets, even an average team ends up winning because they just stumbled upon an opportunity which just nobody else saw, and they managed to build a product. Like Twitter, for example, Twitter used to keep going down all the time. If you see the early years, right, every month it used to fail. The site used to go down, but it still worked. Like Zuckerberg on the other hand was very very anal about it, that my site will never ever, like, he had this rule I think in his office, or I forgot the exact anecdote now, but it was a big deal for him that the site will just never go down, okay. Twitter was like a complete mess on the other hand, but the founders fought. One CEO left, the other guy came, then third guy became CEO, but it's still a multi-billion company, right? So they discovered a niche that people want to vent out their thoughts online, and they went for it and they built it, right? So these kind of, like, even now if you see the product, it has barely changed in the last 10 years also. Like I started using Twitter in 2009, by and large it's still the same. So they have done some tweaks here and there, but by like 80% of it is the same, right? But it works, and I'm a retained user. So some products, some markets are like that, where once you build, like, even if you build a okay product, it'll still work because the market and the pain are that bad.
Right. So what does a typical day look like in your world as a VC?
So my world is basically professional WhatsApper is what I call myself. I do three things in the day. I do emails, I do WhatsApp, I do calls. Okay, that's pretty much what I do. And if I get some time to think, then I'll probably set it out and maybe spend some time reading, learning, or thinking about stuff, or doing some research about a company that I'm looking at.
Right.
But pretty much most of it is just talking to other people, whether it's on WhatsApp, on email, or on calls. I like to split my day into half, where I'm doing calls and not doing calls. So usually in my second half I schedule calls. I do my calls after 2-3 p.m. and then they'll go until whatever 7-8 or more. And those calls will be usually pitch calls.
Okay.
Founders who want to talk to us, tell us their story, raise money from First Check. Sometimes there are calls from other investors who want to know what companies we have invested in. Sometimes there are calls from interested investors who want to put money in First Check.
Right.
Sometimes there are calls with potential reference checks I'm doing on a founder. So these are all calls.
Right.
Okay, then part one of the day will be I'll keep open to do my email, to do agreements.
Right.
I get a lot of contracts to read that I have to sift through and approve before we sign on them. I get a lot of I have to sort of raise money for deals that we're doing. So all of that I do in my part, and also I keep that slot open for founders. So any of the companies that we have invested in, if they need me, I should be available at least within 24 hours. If not within the next hour, within 24 hours at least, right? So at least that slot I keep open so that if somebody calls me, in the mornings I'm usually available. Okay. And for firefighting, so like there are often a lot of stuff that gets which is not finished yet. So I like to start my day early. By 7:38 I like to be working. I'll either start reading some stuff online on Twitter, or I'll start working on email and start getting through it. So by 11-12 I try and get through with email, getting back to people, agreements, all of this stuff that I have to sit alone and do. By the second half is when calls start.
What's your hardest challenge been so far with First Check? It could be solving a problem for a company. It could be the process of learning how to be a VC. So far in your journey, what's been the most difficult goal for you to achieve, problem for you to solve?
That's a good question. So see, because I was sort of mentored and launched by India Quotient, right? So they took care of a lot of the tough problems for me. As a new VC, you have to build a brand. Right. We didn't use the India Quotient brand. We set up a separate fund and set up a separate brand. So I did have to sell myself.
Right.
I think that's what I would. I'm not sure if this is the answer, but if I had to choose the hardest thing, I would choose that, how do you get to a place where even the best founders take your money?
Right.
And that's what you want to do, right? As a VC, you want to be in the best companies. You want to be helping people who nobody else wants to help, right? Because, you'll do that, but you don't want to invest there because, like, it's very highly unlikely that this, like, once in a while you have that contrarian take, okay, I see something in this team or this person that nobody else sees. But usually the crowd is right? So the crowd usually knows that, okay, these teams, like this guy has built and sold a company. He's now starting his second company. There's a good chance that he'll succeed. Right? So how do I get into that deal? So building a brand for yourself, being able to demonstrate that, and building deal flow, right? Where even when these very good founders, they cold mail us and they come to us for funding, where I know that this guy would easily raise money with or without me, right? That's I think the hardest part. And I would say we are still, of course, not there yet. But that's like ongoing journey, because there it's an open competition, right? You're competing with the best of the best in the world, right? The founder has an option to go raise from Sequoia, from Accel, from Y Combinator. And these guys have been around for decades, right? So why should they come to First Check? So building out the differentiation, making yourself worthy enough where they feel proud to take you on board. That's the hardest part.
And what's your favorite part of this job? Favorite and least favorite part of being a venture capitalist?
Least favorite, definitely the paperwork.
Okay.
There's a shit ton of paperwork
it,
that you have to go through and read, and every agreement, every company we fund, after funding the stuff they'll send you to sign. India is like, I keep saying this, that dealing with paperwork is the bane of being born Indian. If you are born in India, you better start practicing signing stuff since you're 5 years old. But otherwise, that's the least favorite part, all the paperwork that you have to deal with. Best part, I think, is once you invest, right, and you are the founder's friend. Now you both care about this company's success, right?
You're also emotionally invested.
You are emotionally also emotionally, yes, and you want this thing to be there in the world.
Right.
So you and the founder really jam well together after, like so in the First Check model, most of the deals are sourced by the venture partners, right? But oftentimes even I build a good relationship with most of the founders, right? So they call you for help, they call you for advice, they call you for all types of things. I got this term sheet for my next round, what do you think about it? Or I'm thinking about this product. I think this new product might work, or this channel is not working. What do you have any ideas? So there's this jamming with founders on all these topics I love a lot, because you sort of live their life vicariously. That's the word. You live their life vicariously, and you get a breadth of exposure on what is happening in the world. You get to learn about so many things that you just didn't have any idea. Like, wow, this is also a thing in the world types. So like one of our best performing companies is Jiva, right? They run a silver jewelry brand. I had no idea about the jewelry market when we invested. Like, we did it because of a venture partner, and that company is doing superbly well. So every time I talk to him, I learn something new, because I have never, even though I've been married, somehow I never really bought jewelry for my wife except for the wedding. And before that also, we never really got into gifting and all that. So it was just like a completely new world for me, that okay, there are people who spend this much on jewelry, this is what they like, this is what they don't like. Here's how you can sell jewelry online, here's how this company is growing, here's how recycling is money. So bunch of stuff you will learn from a founder like that, or from the space tech guys, Yashas and Rohan from Bellatrix. Those guys are building a thruster for satellites, man. Like, again, I knew nothing about that. Like, they educated me about it. They told me whatever I know about the space tech world, how what the players are, what different players are there, what technologies exist. So any kind of jamming I do with founders I really enjoy that, because I come back smarter from that. I learn a lot more, and even if one of my ideas gives them some boost, I feel very happy about it, right? So and selfishly speaking, they do the work. I'm just doing the jamming, right? So you can give the idea and then finally they will execute, right? But you get to do this every day with different people, and the grunt work is done by the founder, that's the way the world works, right? With the investor-founder relationship. But I like jamming with the founders, helping them out. Sometimes maybe I'll have an idea. If I don't have an idea, I'll connect them to people who are from the domain who can help. Like, we'll get calls saying that our retention is bad. We tried this, and users are just not sticking to the app. What should we do? So then we'll try the app, we'll see why they're not working, maybe we'll talk to some users, I'll connect them to friends who killed it at retention. So that kind of stuff is what I really like. And number two, I would say, is the pitches. the good pitches where you found sometimes a founder just blows you the fuck away. Like you do a call and you're like, man.
Right. Like the good
Yes.
pitches are almost like master classes.
Yeah, like
of
you've
that
been on
domain.
them with
Yeah.
us, right? So some of them you just feel, man, like you want to just blot out right there. I'm going to fund you, man. Like
Right.
no matter what, I'm going. We have done this
Right.
often. Like we just finished the call and in 60 minutes I've told them I'm 100% going to give you the check. So yeah, some of those moments are also pretty epic where you meet a person who just blows your mind away. Like my God, like how did this person even think through? How did they even build
any
this?
come
Like,
to mind, like any ones specifically that you can
yeah,
think
the
of?
Bellatrix guys. I mean, that story is just insane. Like I'm sure like in the next 3-4 years they'll be celebrated like Elon Musk in India, because I mean think about it. These are two kids. They are 24 years old, 25 years old now I think, and from no-name colleges from Coimbatore and Mysore, and they're building thrusters for satellites. I mean, it's a insane
Right.
story, and they raised money. They are India's first private company to get a contract from ISRO.
Right.
The first private, and the story is just nuts. Okay, he just wanted, like that guy Rohan, right? He blew up his kitchen in 12th standard because he was trying to make rocket fuel on the gas stove.
Oh wow.
He's got like plastic surgery up till here.
Right.
You meet a guy that you know that this guy is going, like, if I fund him or not, somebody else fund him or not,
Right.
this guy is going to do this for life.
Right.
He's mad about it. Okay, like even the Drink Prime guy was like that. Vijay.
Right.
Vijay, I didn't get on the first call, but when I met him, I got it. Like this guy's crazy, like because
Right.
he'd been doing water purification for 5 years. Okay, again, I was just like, yeah, who thinks about water purification?
24 hours a day.
Yeah, like this is such a drab and weird ass boring topic. Like
Yeah.
I never thought I'd invest in a water purification company. Okay, and
Right.
when he pitched me, I thought it's some kind of toy, or I just didn't
Right.
get it.
Right.
But there was something to it, so we told him, you come and meet us. Like I don't want to do this on the phone. I'll decide after we meet. And we met this guy for an hour. He went on about water purification में ये method है, ये है. We tried this, then we did this, and I was just like, God, this guy, like, this guy is fanatic about this, right? And
Right.
he started by delivering water cans online.
Okay.
Then he realized that the economics of that never works, because one guy can only carry 1 or 2 cans. You can't ship like a Flipkart में the delivery boy can carry multiple packages, right? Water can you can't send multiple with one guy. So that was a big problem. He did that for 2-3 years and realized this maths doesn't work. Then he decided, okay, why can't I make the water at the customer's location? And then they said, okay, that's a purifier. So then they realized, why aren't people buying purifier? Only 6% Indians have water purifiers. That's crazy, right? Our drinking water is not potable in our taps,
Right.
right? So why don't people buy purifiers? Because they can't afford it. Nobody wants to spend 15,000, 10,000, 12,000 rupees on a purifier, right? So then they figure, okay, what if I don't have to charge them for it? What if I can maybe just charge them monthly? So and then they made this internet connected. So it's a crazy. You can see that the guy has spent 5 years coming to that realization that, okay, this is how I can crack this market. Only 6% Indians have purifiers, and here's how like we can triple or maybe 5 times that number can happen, right? If only we add a product. He's basically sachetized it for India.
Right.
So that kind of passion and insight about a market, you once in a while you see that in a founder, that just blows your mind. Like, and after that you just jam with that person and you feel privileged that this kind of person will call you for advice or for help, and I can, even if I can do 1%, 0.1% also, if I can do to help this kind of a founder, it's very fulfilling.
Right. What do you think really motivates you? Like, of course, everybody works to earn a living and blah blah blah. But what about your job makes you want to get up and start working at 7:30 in the morning?
I don't do that 7:30 every day, but yeah,
Right,
most
right.
days
Yeah,
at least 8:30.
Right,
I would
right.
say I'm working.
Let's say 7:30 for the camera.
So motivation, yeah. So there's no one answer. I mean, see, at one level, I've been there and done this at my startup, right? So I know what it's like. You feel like you're blindfolded and you're just grappling in the dark. Something I should hold on to. Okay, that's what the first 1 or 2 years of your startup feels like. You took the jump,
Yeah.
and now you have to
Now
build
you're
that
just
parachute.
falling,
You're
you have to
falling.
figure it
You can see the floor.
Yeah.
I have that much time left.
Right.
I better fucking build a parachute before I hit the ground,
Right,
right? And
right.
it's a very stressful, it's an insane thing to do with your life. I still tell people who tell me I want to start a company, I tell them don't do it. It's pretty insane.
Right.
So to help that person, I like doing that because I've gone through it. I had taken that jump,
Right.
so I know how bad it is. And if somebody does help you out, you really feel very nice.
Right.
That's one, and that's more of a personal level thing. Two is I genuinely, I'm a dreamer. Like my wife or my friends, right? Oftentimes while talking, I'll drift off into something else because I'm just thinking of something else, or I'm very curious and I'm a very dreamer type of person where I think of things that other people have not thought of or have not spent time on. So these kind of ideas really excite me. Somebody comes and tells me I put a chip in a water purifier. I'm like, wow, okay. Like other people don't care about stuff like that, but it excites me.
Right.
And so yeah, I like tinkering around with stuff and like imagining how the world could look like. That's two. I think third is of course the money. I expect to make a pretty decent sum of money from this if I become a successful venture capitalist. I think it's a good way to, make some money upfront because you get paid a salary,
Right.
and then also make a large check at the end of it when you can return your fund. So you're invested in. I like professions where you have skin in the game. Okay, so I view the world where there are some jobs you do where it doesn't matter if you succeed or fail. It's going to be politically incorrect, but there are jobs like that, right?
Yeah,
like,
of course.
Like
Most jobs.
most jobs are like that. Like your personal
Most
outcome
corporate
is
jobs are
bounded,
Right.
right? And whether you succeed or fail at your job, you will still get your paycheck, and that's what. Even if you blow it out of the park, you will still make the same money. If you fail, also you will make the same money, right? I don't like that. I like to be in a position where if I do well, I should do well
High stakes.
financially. If I don't do well, it's on me. I tried, didn't work, it didn't work.
High stakes, high rewards.
Yeah. Not, high stakes is different, but
Yeah, yeah,
stakes should
sure,
be there.
Sure.
Skin in the game should be there, right? So I like that also about my job. And yeah, and I think lastly, as a Indian, I feel very strongly that we are a country which has suppressed our entrepreneurs for generations, and we have just not done enough to, let young people go do their thing. Like one of our best companies was Air India, right? J.R.E. Tata was one of India's best entrepreneurs, probably the world's best entrepreneurs ever. His pilot license was 001. He was the first pilot in India. He built a world-class company that the New York Times and these foreign publications should rate them as one of the top 5 airlines in the world. And our government took it away from him. They nationalized that company, right? And this we've been doing again and again. Like in India, if you study our history for the past 70 years, it's a case study in how to be poor, right? We shoot down people who want to do something and who want to build stuff, who want to create stuff, who want to sell stuff. We make it as hard as possible for them to do that, right? So I want that to change. Like we will never graduate from this third world status if we don't free our entrepreneurs and give them capital, back them, give them expertise, support them, let them build companies, right? So we just look at the last 5 years, right? Where have the jobs come from? They have come from startups. Swiggy and Zomato and all employ like 3 lakh, 5 lakh people. Flipkart employs lakhs of people. What would these people be doing if these companies didn't exist? Right? They would be on a farm somewhere. So I think in the longer scheme of things also, I feel my work has meaning because of this. That if we back companies, we support them, even if some of them really end up working, right? They could truly impact like millions of people. Customers that they serve, employees that they hire, money that they return to investors. It's a big ecosystem thing. So I feel like we see at a spot where your work truly does have impact on the world, and you can also make money from it. So that's why I love doing what I'm doing.
Right. And we've seen so much change in the startup ecosystem in India in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Less than that even. So where do you see the Indian startup ecosystem and where do you see FirstCheck in the next 10 years?
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there's like a Zameen Asman difference in what we were in when I started in 2012 and what it is. And even if you go before that, see the original wave came in early 2000s. And Sanjeev Bikhchandani started Naukri.com and Deep Kalra started Make My Trip.
The change has almost been exponential.
Yeah, but for many years it was flat.
Just flat, yeah.
Yeah, like so after the .com bust, Sanjeev had to struggle for years, and I think even the Make My Trip guy used to run a digital marketing agency on the side to make money and survive. And then slowly internet came and started becoming bigger and bigger. Now there are college kids getting funding. So I mean today it's already way better than what it was say 5-10 years back. But there is still a long way to go. Okay, there are a lot of, like I would say today also there are some set categories and people who can raise money, but so the positive thing is that today a Noah or a Kushal can go and raise money. Okay, like if somebody who graduated from BITS in say 2005, they would not have raised money. There was just no ecosystem in India. Okay, or graduate from IIT also, ISB, whatever. there was no VC funds in India. Okay, so their dream was that I will go to the Valley and I'll go do MS at Stanford and I'll get a green card and I'll work there, right? That dream has now changed.
Right.
It is very clearly changed, and that I think is I tweeted this also. I think that is the biggest underrated thing that has already happened in India in the last 5 years. That IIT Bombay ka computer science batch, the dream is now to build a company, right? Like the most ambitious kid 10 years back used to think, yeah, I'll go work at Google and Facebook. Now the most ambitious kid thinks that I'll start a company, I'll raise $5 million, I will do this, I will go sell here, do that. That is huge. That's a generational like shift in mindset, like, and I can't stress it enough. It's huge, right? But so at least these class of people who are from good colleges, who have some work experience, not necessarily colleges, but people who have basically built stuff and done stuff, they have access to this kind of risk capital. So that is a big change. That will only increase exponentially from here. Right. So now people like Yashas, as I said, and the Bellatrix guys, the Drink Prime guys, they're not from IIT or BITS or any of these branded fancy colleges. They are from Tier 2, so it's now percolating down. And I would say in 5-10 years it will go down even further, where it will become even more open and even more meritocratic. Like if you have a good idea and you build something, you will get money to do it. That is a huge change, because like so my dad runs a business, right? When he started a business, he had already worked at L&T for I think 14 or 15 years. Okay. He still had to borrow money against my mom's gold. He had to go put it in the bank, get a gold loan. वो gold loan के लिए भी had to get some guy to sign it with him so that the bank will give him the loan. And my granddad went to some money lender locally, and so the bank only gave him some 50k or something, and then my granddad ponied up the money at some 14% interest from somebody, and then that's how my dad got started. Okay, you have to like literally beg, borrow from everybody in your personal network, right? And he had a network, and this is for a engineer from one of the best Bombay colleges who went to L&T and did all this. Even he had that kind of problem to raise capital. Right? Today's kids just go pitch, they get a term sheet. We are funding kids like all the time. So that's a big change, right? So I think we are onto something for sure. And I feel like when you give young people the freedom and the capital to build stuff that they want to do, you get the Facebooks and the Ubers and the Airbnbs of the world. So those companies will now start to come out of India also. So we are already there. The next step will be to build global companies, which is also again started to happen, where at least in SaaS you have companies from India which are building for the world. My hope and prediction is that this will also happen in consumer, where like a TikTok or a Facebook will also come out of India, and that will just blow it out of the park. So maybe if I look at what the stock market will look like in say 2030, it's possible that all top 10 stocks will be startups which were funded in India, built in India.
Right. We've been going for quite a while now.
Yeah.
So I'll ask my last few questions.
Yeah.
What are some books and podcasts that you recommend often?
Okay, so
you don't have to, if you don't listen to podcasts, you don't have to answer for.
No, I do. This year it went down because I used to listen to podcasts while driving, because I need to do something physically. I can't just sit and listen in one place. So either walking or driving, I need to do. This year we didn't do either of that, right? So podcast went down quite a bit. But I love Invest Like the Best by Patrick O'Shaughnessy. Then I love How I Built This by Guy Raz. Right. Then my first sort of gateway podcast was a serial one. I think everybody first heard serial when they got into podcasts. What else do I now listen to? I listened to a bunch of NPR stuff, which was so when I was at Upgrad, I used to drive a lot to and fro from office. I had to spend 1 hour in the car minimum every day. So back then I used to listen to all kinds of NPR podcasts on science, on business, technology. But now not so much. Now I have only two names, which is Invest Like the Best and How I Built This by Guy Raz. Yeah. Books, again, unfortunately, since I started First Check, books have sort of gone out of my life, at least for the past year and I've just been too busy, and it's an excuse you can say, but whatever, I've not been able to read much. But till I started First Check, I should read a lot. Like there were years when I should do 30-50 books in a year. So I would say I like reading. So I like when I used to read everything and anything under the sun. One of my favorite books is India Unbound by Guru Charan Das. Every entrepreneur in India should read it, because you will realize how far we have come, how bad it was for us 10-20 years back, what socialism did to this country. Why are we poor? That book will answer that question for you. Why are we a poor country? Right? So India Unbound is one of my favorite books. Then on the investing side, I loved. There's this book called Charlie Munger, The Complete Investor by Trent Griffin.
Okay.
So that book opened my mind up to what investing really is. After Nayi Disha didn't work, I had joined Upgrad thinking I should learn what a good business is built, right? So I also decided to read more, and I thought, okay, my business didn't work, but what is a good business? What businesses are considered good? What businesses make money? How do I judge that? So I started reading a lot about investing, and then I found this guy Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, who had been investing for years, right? And then I went on that rabbit hole on Farnham Street. Farnham Street podcast was also great, by the way. And that's how I discovered this book. And Charlie Munger has a biography also called Poor Charlie's Almanac, but that's very big and very expensive. A better way to discover Charlie Munger is to read this book, The Complete Investor by Trent Griffin. That book is fantastic. It sort of opened my eyes to a sort of operating system, that you can build for yourself to decipher the world around you. That's how I would put it. Where he describes these things called mental models, where you can basically look at, you as a human being, right? You are thrown things at you non-stop every time, right? If you sit down to think through things deeply for every single thing that comes to you, you cannot function, right? But if you have models that if X happens, I'll do Y. If X and Z happen, this is how I will react, right? You are able to deal with the world in a much better way.
Right.
So Munger taught me that you should learn a lot of things about a variety of fields, and you don't need to be a PhD in that, but you should know the basics, right? Like now I know the basics of economics, of finance, of tech, bunch of different stuff I know the basics of. That enables that cross-disciplinary thinking, right? That opens your mind up to a bunch of different stuff which you would not otherwise have thought of.
Right.
So Charlie Munger, everything written by him, said by him, or written about him, I recommend. Then which is the other good book? I had really liked India After Gandhi by Ram Goa. I had liked I don't know, my Goodreads is public actually. I think it's public, so you guys can go and check that out.
Below. Yeah.
Again, I haven't read much in the last 2 years, but before that I used to read a fair bit. I read a great book by this guy called Ed Thorpe last year on A Man for All Markets. That was also a very good book. Ed Thorpe was one of the first hedge fund guys in the world. He was the first quant hedge fund guy.
Okay.
He's a guy who figured out you can make money with maths. You
Right.
can predict where the market will go and make money from it. He cracked blackjack. All the casinos in the US banned him
Okay.
because they had figured out how to for sure make money from blackjack.
Right.
Okay, and very interesting chap. Like some of the work he did, somebody else got a Nobel Prize for it later on. Because he didn't publish it, but the other guy did.
Right.
So again, Ed Thorpe was a very interesting chap. Learned a lot from that book on, again, markets, understanding stuff, finance, and so on. Which other book can I recommend? Steve Jobs, again. That's been a long
Gateway
time.
drug to entrepreneurship.
Gateway drug, exactly. And yeah, so I think one more hole that most people I meet have in their thinking is that, at least in the tech world, is they are very disconnected from the way other businesses work.
Okay.
Like if you ask a 25-year-old, let's say you ask an average 23-year-old Bitsian who's graduated his work for a couple of years, how does Asian Paints make money, or how does HDFC Bank make money? They usually don't know the answer. They know how Facebook makes money and Google makes money, and they know how SaaS companies work,
Right.
but they will not know how Asian Paints, why is Asian Paints so valuable, right? So there was this book called The Unusual Billionaires by Saurabh Mukherjee, which I really liked because they covered like these 10 great Indian companies like Asian Paints, Marico, HUL, HDFC Bank, and so on, that have consistently done very well for more than decades, and they have always made money for their shareholders. So that book was an eye opener for me. That I read that sometime around the same time I was reading Munger and all, because I was reading more about the Indian stock markets. But I think that book opened my eyes to how companies in India operate, what Indian markets are like, and what it takes to build a long-lasting institution type company where, like, no matter, like Munger has this saying that I like to invest in companies that even a fool can run, because one day a fool will run them. And there are these companies like that in India where it doesn't matter if the employees show up to work or not. Like Google is like that, I feel. Like Google, tomorrow if half the staff says, what have you, 90% people don't show up, they'll still make money this year,
They're
right?
so dependent on them.
Exactly, like, and it's on autopilot. People go, they book ads, they pay them money, they pay them in advance that I'm going to buy these credits for ads and I'll use them, and then Google sets the price, Google buys it, everything is automated, right? So there are these kind of companies. That book helped me a lot to understand like how these companies become so big and why do they become long lasting, and like why can they forever go on making money.
My last question, since we're both from BITS,
Yeah.
what was your college life like, and what advice do you have for kids who are in college right now?
My college life was a lot of fun. I consciously chose to go to BITS Goa, even though Pilani I was not getting some great branch, but still I knew that I don't want to. So I had spent 1 year in Kota before I went to BITS.
Okay.
I was done with Rajasthan at that point.
Yeah.
Bro, I'm not going to spend another. Of course, it was wrong. Pilani is also a lot of. It's
Yeah.
a very fun place.
Right.
But I wanted to be in a good place with good weather and like things to do after academics also.
Yeah.
And so I had a lot of fun in Goa. We spent pretty much. At least the last 2 years, so we spent partying like every week almost. So
Right.
we were not good students, and my CGPA was always 5 point something.
Okay.
I barely got to 6 by the time placements came, and after PS2 I reached some 6.66 or something. So my final
Right.
CG was 6.667, something like that.
Right.
So not advisable for everyone, but
Right.
I would say, see, there are kids, at least in my time, I knew that by the first, second year, I realized that, okay, this mechanical thing is not for me. Like, I don't really like it, and I don't see what I'm going to do with this stuff in my life. So I actively started doing other things. I read a lot. I was the sponsorship head on campus. I started a social media company on campus. We got clients for that company. We earned money. So I was always doing something or the other. I would not just sit in my room and play games online, or whatever, watch TV shows and smoke pot and chill. Like, there are people who just chill for 4 years, like, right? कि अभी college आ गए हैं, so we don't want to do anything. So that approach is wrong.
Right.
So either you go do your academics and get a good grade, so you can go get a job after campus and secure your future and all, or you learn some skill.
Right.
You learn to code, learn to design, learn to do podcasting like what you are doing, or you learn animation, learn selling, learn something which is of value in the world.
Right.
Don't waste your 4 years in campus. And by learn, I mean it could be anything. Learn on your own, learn in class, do whatever you want, but don't waste your time. That's my one advice to college students. But I see too many kids who come out of IIT BITS saying, we didn't study anything for 4 years. Yeah, but you had the internet, right? So why didn't you, like, if your class sucked, so you could have attended YouTube, right? Like,
Right.
what kind of answers in 2020 that I didn't learn anything in camp? Then why were you there?
Right.
So I feel like a lot of kids still don't understand that they can act. Like, at my time, I had to fight with my dad and buy a photon. Uspe 2 Mbps speed used to come on campus, right? Because the campus net had blocked YouTube. Bunch of it was very weird. Like, if you search for analytics, it would be banned because it had anal in analytics, right? So half the stuff on the internet was not accessible.
Right.
So I went and got a photon, and whatever I learned was because of that goddamn photon. Like, on the 2 Mbps connection, I discovered Twitter and YouTube and learned about all Steve Jobs. All that happened because of that photon, right? So now every kid has an internet connection, so they have no excuse left. In fact, there's this video by Bill Gurley. Okay, Bill Gurley, one of the best VCs ever. He's a partner at a fund called Benchmark. So just Google on YouTube. Maybe we'll share the link in the notes. Right?
Yeah, sure.
I think the talk is called Chasing Down a Dream,
Okay.
where he talks about how you can basically achieve something in life, right? What is a modus operandi? Like, he's funded people like Uber and a bunch of very successful founders he has worked with. So he has seen the pattern of success,
Right.
and there is a clear pattern. The number one step in that pattern is you take something and you learn everything there is to learn about that thing. Doesn't matter if you're 18 or 20 or 88 years old, right? But if you decide that I want to be a VC, you can't not know a VC story,
Right.
because the internet was there for free, right? So how come you have not read it? Then you're not a good VC then, right? So, or if you want to be a programmer, you say you want to learn JavaScript or whatever, React Native, you have everything at your disposal, right? You don't have any excuse to say that I don't know this because you didn't learn it. Like, that's the only answer, right? So learn something is what I would say. Don't do it with the expectation of getting an immediate payoff, but explore your curiosity and go down that rabbit hole, fulfill it, learn whatever you can about that thing. It will pay you back off in the future for sure.
Right. Thanks a lot for doing this. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, my pleasure, dude. Thanks so much. Thanks, Noah.
Cool. Come.
Thank you so much for watching that episode. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this with all your friends. See you in the next one.